What is up, y'all? Welcome back to another Fish the Moment live stream. 2 weeks in a row now, we are back on the live stream grind. Super excited to talk about the history of ledge fishing. I wanted to do this podcast or live stream in more of a podcast form, so if you're going to the lake or you're in the office or anything like that, you can just listen to this live stream or podcast. I also have some graphics I'm going to be showing, things like that, but wanted to mix it up a little bit, do a few different formats and see what you guys like. Before we get into all that though, do want to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of the Fish Moment live stream, Bridgeford Foods. Bridgeford has been a longtime sponsor of the Fish the Moment podcast, live stream, all of our long form content, and they make some of the best beef jerky on the market, and more importantly, they support bass fishing. There are several pros on the professional tour that have their boats wrapped by Bridgeford. The Bridgeford guys also have a prize pool they do at the US Open Bass Tournament where they have $1 million prize if you catch, I think it's a lake record or state record smallmouth or just the biggest one caught in that tournament. Not exactly sure on the rulings on that one, but they do some really cool stuff in the fishing industry, and they also support one of our fan favorites and one of the co-owners of Core Tackle, Matt Steffen. So if you guys enjoy this content, you enjoy Matt's content, Core Tackle, all that stuff, definitely support Bridgeford Beef Jerky. They are one of the main reasons Matt and I are able to do what we do on our YouTube channels and be able to work in the fishing industry. So huge shout out to Bridgeford. Also just a great snack. Great stuff to take on the lake. So love this sweet teriyaki beef jerky. Check it out at Walmart, dollar stores, anywhere you can see it in the checkout aisles, pick some up. Good deal. So what I want to kind of walk through today is basically the history of ledge fishing and kind of break down how I see it developing from the early 2000s when I started ledge fishing, like 2006, and maybe even a little bit earlier than that, all the way through current times. And it's kind of spurred by the Major League Fishing broadcast that I was actually a part of, which was super cool this past weekend on Toledo Bend Reservoir. I did a breakdown live with JT and Chad for the Deep Dive app, and it was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed that. And we're going to be doing that for the Santee Cooper tournament as well. Also, before we get into it, I want to thank everyone in the stream. Got to get back into my live streaming habits. We got Raylo, Aaron, Brian, let's see here, Lack, David, and Whirly Birds. How's it going? Good deal, guys. So basically, want to break down the history of ledge fishing, going to get into graphics, all kinds of stuff. Also, before we get into this, let me actually switch back over here. There's another live stream going on right now, which is Bass Talk Live. If you've probably watched this, you've probably seen Bass Talk Live. There is going to be a stream put on by Matt Pangrak. I think Matt Steffen's on it, and it's basically to help support Miles Berghoff, who is basically going through some big challenges in his life right now, and it's to basically support the treatment for one of his kids. So if you guys want to help support Miles, who contributes to Fish the Moment, also to the Bass Fishing Declassified YouTube channel, also just an all-around great guy, head over to that Bass Talk Live stream just to figure out ways that you can help support and donate or whatever you guys are comfortable doing. And then if you want to go, check that out and come back over here or whatever, this also gets posted to my YouTube channel after the fact. So no worries if you want to head over there. Definitely supports a great cause. So definitely check out Bass Talk Live if you're interested in that. But we're going to still be here as well, breaking down the history of ledge fishing. So now that we got all that out of the way, let's switch back over here. Good deal. So basically, the history of ledge fishing, in my opinion, is very, very old. Goes back as early as bass fishing started, but it really started getting defined in like the 90s and early 2000s. Now, I do want to define what ledge fishing is and kind of the transition to what is now kind of known as offshore fishing. When we first talked about ledge fishing back in the day, it really was ledge fishing, fishing ledges, fishing drop-offs, things like that. And it's transitioned away from that to offshore fishing, though they kind of have been synonyms through time. So I have a nice little couple graphics here. Now I want to show you what a ledge is using some side imaging, down imaging, things like that. But I also want to show you what has changed with this definition over the years and kind of what I see as a progression over time. So basically, a ledge is a place where you have a let me try to find this example here. So ledge is basically a place where you have shallower water. This is 20 feet of water, that then quickly drops off into deeper water. In this specific situation, you have the top of the ledge here on your 2D sonar, and you have your creek channel over here. If we want to kind of translate that over to a map, what that's going to look like, this is Pickwick Lake, which is like a famous Tennessee River ledge lake, is basically a place where you have shallower water, let's say 20 feet of water in this area, dropping off into a channel, 50 feet of water. So if we were to pull up the picture from before, I can just kind of pull this over here. Let me try to get all this together. Here we go. So if we pull these up side by side, basically the top of the ledge right here, 19 foot, is right here in this down imaging image. And then the creek channel right here, 50 feet of water, is over here in this image. And you can see that there's a sharp break from shallower to deeper water, and that's what's happening here. You have shallower water, this kind of darker blue, that then transitions to these thick lines. Those thick contour lines indicate that sharp break. That's where it goes from shallower to deeper water very quickly. Then you have your creek channel over here. And there's ledges all over the place on lakes all across the country. Some of the more famous ledge fishing lakes are obviously on the Tennessee River like this, but there's also a lot of ledges that you can find on, lakes there like highland reservoirs like Beaver Lake, on river system lakes like Lake Dardanelle, where I learned to ledge fish. And I want to kind of give you some examples of what those look like as we go through here, just to give you a grounding of what's going on. But basically, that is the general concept. I have a couple more graphics to give you an idea of what this kind of looks like. So here's another graphic. If the other one wasn't really sitting right for you, you basically have, again, surface of the water, bottom of the lake, and the ledge drops off. So top of the ledge, active school of fish is setting up on top of the ledge, creek channel. Inactive school of bass is off the ledge, sitting over the creek channel. Kind of some basic concepts here. Now, one thing that I would say is ledge fishing has kind of changed in how the fish set up and what they look like on your fish finders, starting all the way back in like the transition from the early 2000s to like the 2010 range. Before the 2000s, a lot of guys would still catch fish on ledges, like your Rick Cluns, David Fritz, things like that, and they would use their paper graphs, they'd use their flashers, they'd use the very first versions of 2D sonar to basically find where these ledges are out in the lake. They would then either use marker buoys or some sort of way to mark these ledges or mark the areas where these spots were. And just from talking from guys in the past, they might graph down this with their paper graph or their 2D sonar with the flasher and find a stretch that's maybe 100 yards long, drop marker buoys all the way down this, or pill bottles or all kinds of stuff to kind of keep it hidden. Then they get up on here and they would just start fishing down these ledges. They would pick up a deep diving crankbait. That was like the main bait of choice because it helped you cover water, and they would just crank these ledges, and they would go for miles and miles and miles. Nowadays it's a lot easier because we have obviously side imaging, down imaging, we have the mapping, we have GPS, there's all kinds of stuff that helps make ledge fishing a lot easier. But those fish were pretty untapped back then, and there was a lot of schools of ledges on these ledges. So while it might take a guy 3-4 days of practice to run into a school with that old school method, those fish were completely untouched. We now know that the more obvious places where these fish will congregate on these ledges are places where there's like a point in the ledge. So like right in here where it kind of tapers off and goes from a straight stretch of ledge to more of a tapered spot. Same thing here. The creek channel runs up against a point of this island, or there's a big shoal that cuts in the middle here, and they might set up on these ridges or shoals. You have these areas here that are just a hard break in the ledge. You have these bars that are common in the Tennessee River. We can see this super easily now on our contour maps, but these contour maps didn't exist back then. So you just kind of had to figure it out. And that's actually how I grew up ledge fishing too, because a lot of the lakes I had didn't have really good Navionics contour maps. And one actual great example that I have from Google Earth here is this lake over in Arkansas. This is where I actually learned to ledge fish. And the great thing about this lake is it actually has this drawn down image. This is from 2012. I didn't have this image when I was learning, but it can show you what these ledges look like. And I did the old school method, like Rick Clunn and David Fritz and all those guys, where I would basically graph this with my 2D sonar. I would go back and forth, and I would litter this thing with marker buoys. So basically, this is considered a ledge. It is, up here is the flat, out here is the creek channel. So I would drop marker buoys. I'm just going to say, not what I want to do. Marker. So I drop a marker here. I would drop a marker. Oh, that's not it. Marker here. Okay, and then we drop a marker here. And a marker here. So we drop these markers down this ledge. Now, these are like orange marker buoys or whatever. We then take the lake back to normal pool. You can see that there was not actually this drawn down image. And you can see that basically I would drop these markers. I would then drag a football jig. I would drag a crankbait, things over the top of these. And I would just fish down these things. That's all I had. I had 2D sonar. I didn't have mapping or GPS or anything. This lake didn't have a map. It still doesn't really have a map on it. So I would just fish down these ledges, and I would crank them, and I would just throw a crankbait and drag a football jig. And I caught some really, really big fish in the early 2000s fishing this exact style. Now, things started to develop as side imaging came out, down imaging came out. That was like 2008, 2010 range. And I started getting GPS units with contour maps and all that stuff, and I started going to town on the offshore ledge game. So what I was looking for back in the day is I basically would graph around with my down imaging, and I use side imaging as well to kind of find where the ledges were, but I would identify the fish with down imaging because it was really easy to find big schools of fish. This is a giant school of fish right here that I found on down imaging. This was like 2014, 15 probably, 16, 17, I don't know, somewhere in there. Somewhere in that range when, it's almost 10 years ago. And these fish would be stacked up on these drops. They would be all over the place. You'd see them on here. You pull up. I caught multiple 20-pound bags off the spot in one day. Had 6s and 7s. I mean, they were just loaded on this spot. Another spot I found, similar time frame. Again, top of the ledge is sitting here. There's fish all over the top of this ledge. Bait fish coming in, crushing it. You just pull up, throw a crankbait, a jig, whatever, and you just catch fish. So this is kind of the start. This is what I found a lot when I was starting to ledge fish 2008 to 2012. And it was pretty easy to see everything on your 2D sonar, see it on your down imaging. You could see them on side imaging, things like that. Pretty easy back in the day. Side imaging wasn't even that great when I first got it. My first side imaging unit wasn't super great. And I was basically fishing areas, so if we kind of go around to like a Lake Dardanelle, where you would just find, I had the mapping and stuff, and I would just get on the edges of these ledges. So a ledge, 10 foot to 24 foot, I would just graph down this ledge, and you would just find a group on the edge of the ledge. No one else was really doing this or graphing for the schools. Maybe guys would have brush piles they planted or whatever, but I would graph specifically for schools of fish. I pull up, I hammer them on a crankbait, I hammer them on a hair jig, and I hammer them on a football jig. And that's like the 3 baits I threw. That was all I ever threw. Maybe a big flutter spoon, or big, it wasn't even a big one. It was like the Strike King Sexy Spoon. So basically, I would just go down these ledges, and it was just pretty easy. I mean, I had all this stuff pretty much to myself. There were guys who knew like a few spots down this because they would just like fish and just kind of find them randomly, but I would actually be able to graph these and find them with the fish finder, and it was pretty straightforward. There were a lot of fish around on these ledges. So there's fish on these main lake bars. I was like the only one out here on these like main lake bars way out here. People thought I was crazy fishing out here, and I've caught 6s and 7s and 8s on Lake Dardanelle, like fishing out here on the main river channel, and no one was out here fishing with me. I had this stuff all to myself. It was pretty fun for several years when I was like tournament fishing a ton back in the day. Now that's kind of the transition. Like that was ledge fishing, and this was really good May through maybe you could push it to like maybe October some years. But then after that, I mean, you could kind of catch some fish, maybe doing it a little bit like into the winter, but it's not the best for the winter. You can do it a lot better on like lakes like Pickwick in the winter, though it's still not the best deal in the winter. You can catch them doing it, but it's not like it is in the summer. So ledge fishing, offshore fishing, things like that, kind of for me were like a summertime deal. Once I got into the winter, I really focused on fishing like road beds more. I would fish rock piles more. So like if we go back over here to this lake over here, you know, instead of trying to fish these ledges, I would try to find like this, like a rocky spot out here, like a old like pond dam. There's like house foundations and all kinds of craziness out here. You can see. So I'd like fish these house foundations. I'd drag jigs and Carolina rigs and crankbaits, jerk baits over top of this stuff. So I wasn't really necessarily ledge fishing. I was just fishing like areas that are kind of offshore that had like rock or whatever. So I wasn't really trying to fish a ledge. And that was kind of what I did from 2006 to 2014. And it held up really well. Not really that big of a deal. Once you get to like 2014 and on, though, it's like 2020-ish, 21, guys started getting wise to the ledge fishing game. It started to become a lot more difficult to find these big groups of fish that are stacked up, that are easy to see, that are these perfect dotted up images. Guys were figuring it out. These schools were getting tougher to find. They were busted up. They were not as great. So what you started seeing is, I have some images from later in time, you started seeing a lot more situations where it looked like this, where you had one or two fish up on top of the ledge and these fish suspended off the ledge. This is when the scrounger heads, the flutter spoons, like the 8-inch Magnum flutter spoons, the hair jigs, the paddle tail swim baits, that's when they started dominating in the basically like 2014 to 2021 range, is targeting these fish that are basically suspended over the creek channel. And you basically, the way I would fish them is just throw a hair jig or a swim bait up on top, hit the ledge, and as soon as it came off the ledge, I would see it keep sinking, and hit here. Then I would reel it, let it sink for 2-3 seconds, reel it, and just basically try to guess where the bait was. And you could kind of get a feel for it, and you would be able to catch him. Another example of these fish on 2D sonar. So top of the ledge, creek channel, here fish suspended over the ledge. Those are the fish you're targeting. Same exact thing here. This school is a little bit closer to the top of the ledge, though it's still kind of suspended over the ledge. And then there are still schools that, you know, set up on top of the ledge, like this one, that are active and feeding on top of the ledge. So not every school you find is, you know, in this kind of weird situation like this. But basically what we would see is that these fish were getting less pressure because they were off the ledge and guys weren't really dialing it in to this point yet. So it was good for another like 2-3 years. Then everyone kind of figured this deal out, and then these ledge fish got really tricky to catch. You had to go to drop shots. You had to like just, there was times when you could pull up and make it work and you could catch them, but it was not nearly as easy. And it's to the point now where I don't catch a ton of fish on quote-unquote ledges like I used to, especially like big giant bags of fish like I used to. This year, I actually only found like, I think maybe 2 or 3 groups of fish that were like really stacked up on what I would consider like a drop-off or a ledge. And I actually have some photos of these over here. I'll pull these up. These are basically like the only shots I have from this year. Here's one that I found. This is on Beaver Lake, and it's right on the drop off here. This is a nice little group on a little rocky shelf here. You can see the fish right here stacked up. I was actually surprised to see these fish here. Another little group here. Caught these fish cranking like old school style. Water temps were 82 degrees, and it was fun. I mean, I caught like 25 fish off the spot, just cranking. Old school ledge cranking deal. So it does still happen. Like this was earlier, I guess last year, so 2023. You can see those fish are set up, I mean, just absolutely perfect on that ledge. So I'm not saying it can't happen, but I also graphed for 4.5 hours that day and found one group like this. 4.5 hours for one group. So that's not great. That's really not that great. Now, in, I guess, the next scenario, I found another big school of fish, but they weren't largemouth. These were largemouth. These were quality fish, like 2.5 pounders. For beaver, those are good fish. They're not great fish for anywhere else, but for beaver, 2.5 pounders are good ones. This was a school on Table Rock, and it is a nice school, stacked up right on top of a drop-off, on top of a ledge. The ledge is over here, and these fish were up on top of this, and there was bait up here, and they were like chasing the bait up here. It got kind of crazy. They were all over the side scan, like you can see them all over here on the side imaging. This is like exactly what you're looking for when you're trying to ledge fish. It's just loaded up, and you can see all these little small grains of rice. Basically, these are all little dots. These are all fish. So they were stacked like crazy here. Caught a bunch of fish here, but they were all spotted bass. All spotted bass. Caught them on a hair jig. Caught them on a tush with a spunk shad. Core tackle tush with a 5.5 inch spunk shad. Just fishing it like a hair jig. Catching a bunch of fish off the spot. It was pretty good. I mean, you can see these fish are dotted up. Perfect. Exactly what you're looking for. These dots are not too tight together. They're spread pretty horizontally across this deal. They're stacked no more than like 2 or 3 dots tall, so you're not dealing with like a massive stack of fish that's like 7 or 8 fish tall. And they're also not stacked really tight together where you can barely see any space between them. That's when you know you're dealing with a good group of fish. So that's kind of the deal right there. Now, the other day I also found some fish that I graphed that is more in line with what I'm seeing nowadays, which is basically smaller groups of fish that are on drop-offs or on hard spots and things like that, but they're not really on like a ledge, quote unquote. They might be on something, like this is a little like road bed with a hard spot, and you can see a bunch of little dots right here. These are all fish. These are all bass. These are all big bass. I caught almost a 5-pounder off this, lost a couple more. So there's big ones on this spot right here. And if we go back to this other image, we can see it on the 2D as well. Here we go. So these are what those fish look like on my 2D. They don't look like much. I honestly want to go back to I've been using this Garmin unit for my 2D and down imaging. I'm not a big fan of it. I'm thinking about going back to a Lowrance because I like my Lowrance 2D sonar a lot. It's fine. It gets the job done. But anyways, these were bass and they don't look very great on here, but that's what bass look like on my 2D sonar. The way I set my unit up, I know these are what bass look like. I do it for a very specific reason. I try to like filter out trees, and there's things I try to do. It's not as easy to do on the Garmin as it is on a Lowrance or Humminbird. But anyways, it is what it is for now. 40-degree water though. These fish are out here, and they were just loaded on this little rocky spot, and they still get grouped up on stuff like this. So I don't want to get in this doom and gloom that like you can't catch fish on ledges. But again, I was out here for 4 hours. I graphed the entire lake, and I found one group that's set up like this. And that's kind of the common denominator I'm finding with ledge fishing, quote unquote, nowadays, is that you're not finding these massive groups of fish in large quantities. So, for example, back in the day on like a Dardanelle or something like that, I would go through here, and there would be a group like here. There would be a group like here, there'd be a group here, there'd be another group here, there'd be another group here. You'd find a group like over here, here, over here. There'd be groups all over the place. So they're just like stacked up. It's not really like that anymore. Even like on Dardanelle, it's very different. I've talked to friends that fish over there. It's not the same. It doesn't fish the same as it used to. These areas have been just hammered, so it just doesn't really work like that anymore. And like that day I was out on Beaver, for example, I'll show you the exact spot where I had those fish on that quote-unquote ledge. It's right here. It's a very nice little like ledge, basically. 30 foot of water, drops off. They actually are setting up kind of like right here in this area, right in there. But I graphed from here, all this, all this, all of this, graphed in some of this stuff, graphed all the way back here. 4 hours later, I found that group of fish. Now, I caught 25 fish off the spot, and I caught them cranking, and it was fun. But it was 4.5 hours of searching and 4.5 hours of graphing to find that group. And I was looking for a group. And I was like, there's got to be a group out here that looks good and that has some better quality fish. And there was really not much else. There's a few small groups of fish, like little ones, but there was not a lot. And that's just kind of how it's been going for me recently. It's like it's just not as good as it used to be. Now, I don't know if that's just the lakes in the region of the country I'm in, but I hear it on the Tennessee River and Pickwick and all this stuff. I know Gunnersville, they're like all over the ledges, and there's still giant schools and giant groups of fish. So I'm not saying that it's not a deal, but it definitely is not as productive as it used to be or as easy to find this stuff. It takes a lot more graphing. So that's kind of the transition from like the 2000s all the way to the 2021 range. Now we get into 2021 and on, which is the birth of Liv Scope. Liv Scope has changed stuff a lot, and the biggest example of this is the most recent Bass Pro Tour event in Toledo Bend. Again, I helped cover this. I was actually part of the live stream for this, did a little segment for Deep Dive, joined the live crew. It was very cool. It's very interesting, though, because if you look at the top patterns on Toledo Bend, top 10 baits and patterns, you have, number one, Dustin Connell, catching them in drains and ditches with a Demiki rig. Next up, you have Spencer Sheffield catching them in drains and ditches with a Demiki rig. Drew Gill, drains and ditches, Demiki rig. Jacob Wheeler, drains and ditches, Demiki rig. Zach Burge, he was catching them on a jerkbait. He was also catching them on a Demiki rig, but he did catch most of his fish on a jerkbait, so that was one change. Demiki rig 6th, Demiki rig 7th, Demiki rig 8th, Demiki rig 9th, and Demiki rig 10th. So 9 out of 10 were caught in Demiki rig. And the Demiki rig deal, for those who want to know how you do it, basically, if you're going to a lake like a Beaver Lake, basically what you do is you go in the back of a creek, you start at the mouth of it, you graph the entirety of the creek until you start seeing bait. If you see a bunch of bait and maybe a few arches on your 2D sonar, drop your scope and just start scoping around and throw at every single dot you see that's around that bait. Now, you might catch catfish and some drum, but you're going to catch some bass and you're going to run into them eventually. And it's basically just graph as many of these, center of these creeks as you can, and you'll eventually run into some fish, and you just use your live scope and live scope around like crazy. On Toledo Bend, what Connell was doing, and I have a breakdown actually coming out on Monday. I have a full video breaking down what he did. There was some cool stuff he did. There's some interesting dynamics with the water clarity and all that stuff. But basically, he was in this creek, and there was some runoff coming in. I have a whole deep dive breakdown that I did for the live broadcast I'm going to make a YouTube video about. But basically, he was in this creek, and there were just bait swimming in this creek, just through these creek channels and around in here, and there were bass that were chasing them, and there were just a lot of isolated random bass just out here, just in the middle of nowhere. They're not like necessarily related to these drop-offs always, or like related to like cover or anything. There was some standing timber around, there was some other stuff, but basically these fish are just in there because of the bait, and they're following that bait. They might set up on an object every once in a while, but these fish are very hard to catch without forward-facing sonar. Now, right now, the issue is that the only way to really target these fish effectively is with forward-facing sonar. So if you don't have it, it's not that relatable to watch. And also, the most effective way right now is with the Demiki rig, with that jig head minnow, or basically crappie fishing. It's just crappie fishing for bass is what it is. And it really is narrowing down when these fish are setting up on these types of scenarios. It narrows down what these anglers are doing to just basically, you either fish a Demiki rig and you have a good finish, or you don't fish a Demiki rig, and maybe you can throw a jerkbait tube, like jerkbait / Demiki rig / like a hover rig, something like that. That's what you got to do to catch these fish. Now, there are other scenarios, like a 5-fish format versus the every fish counts format, where maybe some of the shallow water stuff or other baits could play, but especially with MLF with their every fish counts, that Demiki rig or like a hover rig, something like that, it's going to be very hard to beat. Now, if you are in a 5-fish format, maybe you could catch 5 big ones, dragging a Carolina rig in the grass, throwing a trap, throwing a chatterbait. So there are other ways to catch fish. But overall, the best method for catching numbers, and also guys Drew Gill had 3 6-pounders the last day. He was fishing over in this area of the lake, just fishing these, drains that are just leading into here. And I don't know exactly which drain he was fishing, but he was fishing one of these, some of these drains over here. Wheeler was over here too. But basically these drains that led in here, and they just found bait that were sitting in the center of these drains and cuts out here, and they were basically just scoping. And they would drop their trolling motor, and that's all they do. In practice, they maybe graph around for bait for a little bit, then just drop the trolling motor and scope. Now, that's personally not my favorite way to fish. I actually really dislike that style of fishing, and I feel like it becomes very monotonous overall. It is the most effective way right now, based on what's happening, to catch these fish. I do feel like that these fish are going to potentially be changing and shifting just because we've seen it in the past. 20 years ago, you could find these fish grouped up on these ledges like it was nothing, and it was super easy to catch them. Then they started dropping off the edge of the ledges, and they started getting wise. I think these fish are going to continue getting wise to these situations. So I'm not saying it's going to be like a Demiki rig forever. Nothing lasts forever by any means. But this is just kind of the state of bass fishing as we see it right this minute. And these fish that are roaming, the pelagic fish is what people call them, or roaming fish that roam on bait, these fish haven't been messed with that much for the past 20 years, really. And now the guys have dialed in the live scope. They know how to figure out which angle the fish are sitting, the direction they're swimming, where their tail is, all this crazy stuff. It makes it so that they can target these fish very effectively. Now, there is a lot of skill to casting at these fish and doing these things. So I'm not going to say there's not skill involved in doing this. And also the location of where to find those fish is also extremely important, which I'm going to break down in my video for Monday. And Dustin Connell basically lapped the field on the final day because he found a unique scenario with a clear water creek with some runoff that was coming in that sucked the bait fish into this creek, and they got the bass all in here and they were feeding, and it was great. And he made a really good decision that day. So there is a lot of variance in where you can fish, which creeks to fish, the more macro elements. But the micro, the basically what to do to get those fish to bite, a lot of it comes down to just throw the Demiki rig. Throw the Demiki rig. Throw the Demiki rig. Not necessarily the most exciting for variety. I think the most viewed clip on the Instagram page for Major League Fishing the week of was basically the Octafo buzzbait fish catch, which was pretty cool, and I enjoyed watching that. And it kind of leads me to something I wanted to ask you guys in the comments. If you're watching this Major League Fishing stuff and everyone's just fishing the same technique, do you get the same amount of interest? And I want to get people who are in the comments, if you could leave a comment or just kind of discuss with me in the chat, that'd be great. Do you get the same level of interest in tournaments or watching content when everyone is doing the exact same thing? Everyone's in these drains or ditches throwing a Demiki rig. For me, it's not that exciting because once you see it once, you kind of see it the entire time. And I don't find that brings a lot of variety to the coverage. I don't find it as interesting. I don't find it as engaging to watch. One thing I always loved when you would watch a tournament like Toledo Bend was that, there might be a guy who was using his, 2D sonar up off the front, and he could be potentially doing this, video game fishing thing. But then there's also a guy probably fishing back in some of these creeks on some grass drains back in here with some some grass edges, and he found them with side imaging, and he's catching them on a trap. And then there's another guy who finds a hump out here that's loaded up with, grass and some bait and throwing a jerk bait. And then there's another guy over here who's throwing a trap down the bank. And then someone's way back in here, fishing shallow. And there's a potential that guys could catch fish in a lot of different ways, and you would learn lots of new ways to fish. And that's why I watch a lot of the coverage personally, is I want to learn new ways to catch fish. I want to be able to take something I see from this event and apply it on my lake. And it's fine with this Demiki rig stuff right now because it's okay, maybe it's new to some of these anglers. And a lot of anglers, it might be new, and learning how to do it is very interesting. But when there's only one pattern that's working, it kind of defeats the purpose of watching the coverage. This is what continues to happen every event, is forward-facing sonar these fish. If this is what happens on, maybe the next tournament, it could be a new pattern on Santee Cooper. It could be guys are perspective moding cypress trees, and everyone in the top 10 is doing perspective mode, watching fish swim around on cypress trees. But if there's only one pattern you take away from each tournament, it really makes it tough to cover stuff. And it also makes it tough from from a content standpoint on my end, because the ideal way, if I'm going to go out to Beaver Lake, for example, scrolled away from Beaver. Let's say I'm going to Beaver Lake, and I'm going to go fish out there. I know probably the best way for me to go catch fish in a lot of situations, especially like maybe January, February, is to go throw a Demiki rig. And it's to go in these areas and just scope around maybe December through January. As we get into warmer, rain and stuff like that, there will be fish in the backs of creeks and stuff. But you basically get stuck in this deal where the best way to catch fish is just go Demiki rig, Demiki rig, Demiki rig. And it may be the best strategy all the time because I haven't really tried it like through March and April. I know I caught them in March pretty well last year doing it too. So I know these fish still eat that Demiki rig, and it's a really effective way because you can target those individual fish. But at some point, I think you guys as the audience, this is my opinion, will get tired of watching me throw a little minnow at fish on Liv Scope over and over and over and over again. Even if I explain that, hey, this is the creek they're in because of all these environmental factors, when I end up getting in there and I just throw a Demiki rig, it's not that exciting. So that is... that's how I feel. Now, my question, I guess, to you is, would you prefer that I focus on the techniques to catch the biggest fish, and then in my videos really focus on where to go? Because that's always what I focus on my videos anyways. Where am I fishing versus what I'm fishing? Because that's, to me, still the most important part, is where on this big lake do I actually go fish? The technique, to me, has always kind of been secondary, but I guess the question is, are you guys okay if I'm doing Demiki rig fishing, let's say for 4 or 5 videos in a row, because that's the most effective technique? Should I always be looking for the most effective technique, using the best approach possible? Or should I avoid the Demiki rig, try something else? Maybe it's a little bit harder to catch fish or whatever. It's not the optimal technique in the day. I wouldn't then be fishing the moment, but it gives you a variety of content. That's... I don't know. That's kind of the dilemma that I've been having recently, and it's hard to say. Can you teach us how to kill deer using thermal scopes? Unfortunately, I don't have the time to hunt. I am strictly focused on fishing, so don't have the experience there, unfortunately. Love they added the live view. It allowed to see what they saw and how they fished at the time. So kind of adding the Liv Scope in with the fishing. I try to do that with my videos too, and I think that does add a lot, especially when you kind of see what the fish are reacting to. The counter argument, obviously, is if you don't have Liv Scope, it's hard to, or forward-facing sonar, you don't have the ability to replicate what I'm doing when I actually am out there. But if you could still get in the same area, maybe those fish are still biting. It's kind of a slippery slope there. And then MP says, no, Liv Scope takes a lot of the different techniques out of fishing, and that's for sure. I do agree with that. I find it interesting only if there's discussion on why they are where they are. I agree with that too, and that's what I tried to bring to my segment in the Major League Fishing broadcast, is like, why did Dustin Connell get in that area, and what made it a better area than anything else? AZ is saying, AZ Go Cat says, I have nothing against it, but it's terribly boring. Just awful to watch. I watched the 2003 Bassmaster on Toledo Bend, and it was awesome. Shallow water bite and a variety of techniques. I mean, that's kind of how I feel, too, a little bit, watching it. And that's the thing I'm a little bit nervous about, because if you look at what's happening here, I'm a little bit nervous that even, like, I make YouTube content, and that's what I do. Am I going to be making boring content even though I'm going after the optimal technique, potentially, the best technique that day, if it happens to turn out to always be something like this, because we find that that's actually the best thing going, does that not become very repetitive, very boring? And that's something that it's a big concern on my part. Let's see here. Matias, greetings from Bolivia. Thank you, sir. Totally agree. Where is the key? Demiki is worth learning for sure. I mean, it's worth learning these techniques and figuring out, like, why is this such a good technique. So I definitely don't want to not teach it. I actually have some really good videos on the Demiki rig, and it's the exact same scenario that Dustin Connell is fishing. There's a video on the Fish the Moment YouTube channel. I'll actually pull up my channel over here. Just give me a second, and I'll show you the video, because it's actually a year ago on Beaver Lake, and it's the exact same deal that he was doing. And not that many people, I don't think, watched the video, so I'm going to see if I can pull this up and show you the video, because if you guys are interested in watching it, it's basically it's a whole video showing where and what I was doing. So I'll come over here. Let's see here. So we got all this here. So where's these videos? Here we go. Sorry guys, I'm trying to find it. This one right here. Big bass hide here, using 2D sonar to reveal giant bass. This video right here is a video of me basically demichi rigging just like they did on the Toledo Bend tournament. This is on Beaver Lake, but it shows the whole process. I'm catching the exact same way Connell was doing it. This is 11 months ago. There's another video here. There's another demichi rig video here. So if you guys are interested in learning about some demichi rig stuff, I have 3 videos in a row that show exactly the style of fishing these guys were doing. It's these 3 videos right in here. So actually I show my 2D sonar down imaging. I show the live scope view. I show everything. So these are great videos if you haven't seen them. Definitely check those out. But anyways, let's keep going here. Finding the bass, finding the biggest bass, that remains the most important and hardest skill to master. I agree with that, and that's also a part that I like. That's why I like going to... Oh, what's going on here? Oh, that's not... It's a home. What's going on? I don't know what's happening. 1 second. Okay. I don't know what's going on there. Something crazy happened. Like the news tab. I've never had that open before in my life. I have no idea where that came from. Anyways, okay, I'm going to switch over here because I have no idea what's going on with my computer. Probably opened up too many tabs. I haven't live streamed in a while. But finding the bass is the biggest key. And that's the thing, too. Like, when I go out... Transition back over here. I really like going to public lakes where I can show you guys exactly the contour maps and everything I'm going, like on a Grand Lake. Now, I could go over here. There are some lakes over here in Oklahoma. I'm not going to zoom into all of them because people could get mad. But I know a bunch of lakes over here in Oklahoma. And, like, this view, like, in this general zone somewhere where there's 10-pounders all over the place. And I could go catch a bunch of 10-pounders if I really wanted to. I know where the lakes are. I know how to go catch them. I have a bunch of people that are like, hey, you could go catch these 10-pounders if you want to. I don't do it because... I prefer to show how to catch fish on like a Grand Lake or like a Beaver Lake, which is a more realistic lake. Lake Uchi is another good lake over here. Lake Hudson. I do go to some smaller lakes around my house, kind of in like this general zone that have a lot of quality fish. I don't have like a bunch of 10-pounders in them, but they're just close to the house. So sometimes it's nice to not have to go out on a giant lake because it is faster to find fish. So when I'm talking about a specific technique or like a bait or something, sometimes I'll go out to the little smaller lakes, but my bread and butter content, my favorite content, is showing you guys how to find quality fish. You know, on Grand, it's like 3+ pound bass on a big lake like this. This is a very large fishery. I mean, from a standpoint of like measurement, we're dealing with, you know, it's 22 miles as the crow flies. So you're dealing with 30 miles and then plus all the creeks and everything. That's a lot of water to cover. And knowing which creeks to go into, where to go, how to do it, is hard. And even when I go out, guys, like, it'll take me 8 full hours to figure out what's going on in Grand Lake. And like, I'm planning on going out here tomorrow, and my plan is I'm going to launch in one of these creeks, and I'm probably going to fish one of these creeks, and I'm going to have to run to another creek, and I may have to run to a third creek and a fourth creek and 10 creeks and just run around and try to figure out what's happening, because a lot of times, like, one specific creek may not fit the best pattern for the day. It might not have the proper water clarity or the proper conditions, and it's very, very hard to force these fish in certain creeks and times to bite. So you have to change creeks, you have to change areas, and that is very time consuming and can take hours and hours. And so I try to show you guys all of that in videos, but also cut out some of it so you can just get to the learning, I guess. Let's see here. As for your videos, it doesn't matter what or where you fish because you teach throughout the videos. Appreciate that, David. For your videos, it's from Whirlybirds. I vote for a mix, some demichi rig days and some days doing other methods. That's my preferred anyways. I don't always go hunting for the demichi rig bite because if it's happening, I'll do it, but it's not something I hunt out necessarily. Can you do videos or uncut streams without scope? Yeah, I can definitely do some videos. My plan is I'm thinking about doing some videos going forward where I do like a day on Grand with live scope, a day on Grand without live scope, and I make one video out of both those days. So I go out, like, let's say back-to-back days, one day with the scope, one day without the scope. It's not going to be apples to apples, obviously, because I'm not going to be able to have the exact conditions or the exact setup, but at least it'll show you my process, and I think that will be very helpful to show you how I go about the how I go about the process of finding fish with both strategies, no live scope with live scope, because it's very different. If I'm going out here on Grand and I'm not using live scope, I'm going to be graphing for 3 times longer than I will with the live scope. For example, if I'm coming into one of these creeks, I'm probably going to get into an area, and if I graph through a certain zone and I kind of graph, like let's say this flat back here, and I see some bait fish setting up, and I find 1 or 2 pieces of brush and maybe a little bit of a few different things, then I'll probably just drop the scope and I'll just start hitting all of the individual isolated targets through here and try to pick off like 1 or 2 isolated fish, because you can actually see those fish on the scope. And I know there's some bait in the area. I know there's some good targets to cast at. And usually you can pick up 1 or 2 of those fish with a jerkbait, a Demiki rig, kind of dialing it in. If I'm doing a non-live scope day, though, I'm going to graph this whole area, and I'm going to wait till I see a group of fish, 7, 8, 10, 15 fish that I know are grouped up specifically, because I know that I don't have the ability to target an individual fish, so I need to find a fish that's setting up like on a specific rock or a specific brush pile or something, and there needs to be more than one there to make them competitive. So I'm going to have to graph way longer with my 2D sonar, down imaging, side imaging, to find a spot like that. And sometimes I just graph these creeks for 4 or 5 hours and I find nothing. And I don't find a situation where there's a group of fish that's stacked up, that's on a spot, that's catchable. Or I find 1 or 2 areas like that and there's not enough fish to even get a full limit. So then I'm probably going to be mixing in some more shallow water stuff where, hey, if there's a really nice rounded point here and transitions to a creek channel and the wind's blowing on it and the water looks good, I'll probably just roll up here and throw a crankbait down these high percentage areas, because I can't really rely on that offshore deal 100% of the time. I have to sometimes mix in like maybe 30% of my day up shallow if I really want to go catch like a good bag of fish. 30-40% of my day needs to be shallow, and 60% of my day is graphing offshore. So if I'm spending 8 hours out there, I might be spending, let's say, 5 hours graphing, 3 hours checking just obvious high percentage shallow water areas that give me a chance to catch fish. Where if I'm just live scoping, I'm probably just going to stay graphing these flats, finding isolated fish, and trying to just pick off 5 fish with the live scope throughout the day, because that's just a lot more efficient process for me. Let's see here. David says, I live next to Prairie Creek Marina. Next time you need someone to hold the camera, I'll do it for free. Just wanted to learn how to fish offshore, for sure. Let's see here. Yeah, the... I don't know if I'm going to be fishing on beaver all that much anymore. I'm kind of going to be going over to Grand a lot more, just because I have the... One second here, let me mute this. There we go. Sorry. So I'm going to be going to Grand a lot because I want to start prepping some videos for the Bassmaster Classic and doing a bunch of content to cover like what's going on here. Just because it's about 30 to 40 more minute drive to get over to Grand compared to Beaver for me, but I like to get over to Grand if I can, just because the Classic's there. So that's probably my plan right there. Let's see here. Clayton says, my problem is that I can't compete against the people at my local club tournaments because most of them are retired and have the money to afford live scope. I, however, have to rebuild my own boat. That is really tough. One thing on the challenge that I find with like competing against the live scope guys is that overall you're going to be in a situation where you're going to be in a disadvantage if you try to play apples to apples with them, if you're trying to do exactly what they're doing. So if I was on Grand, for example, I wouldn't be down here by the dam fishing in the clear water trying to throw a jerkbait or trying to throw a Demiki rig or things like that without live scope, because you're just putting yourself at a disadvantage to the people who are already doing it. Instead, I would probably be up the lake where there's more stained water, and I would try to find, like right now, the warmest possible water that's maybe a little bit stained up in this general zone. And you may have to run into the back of every single creek and like look in the back of all these things and see, is there any like areas where maybe the water's 3 or 4 degrees warmer? Then you might be able to roll into some of these areas and throw a spinnerbait, throw a crankbait, fish a jig, more old school methods. But what you can do is you can put the odds in your favor by finding some unique scenarios, and that's what I kind of do in the deep dive app, guys. Is we try to give tools that allow you to find like areas that maybe have a little bit extra stain in them, or they have some wind blowing on them, or have a water runoff point, things like that come into these areas. And I'm going to be using those tools. I'm going to be showing you guys that as I kind of fish around Grand, because when I'm going through these areas, I might have to run to the back of 30 pockets to find a pocket that has good favorable conditions. But when you find the right one, you could get in the back of one of these little cuts back here. The water's 3 degrees warmer. You just fish a spinnerbait or a jig or a crankbait down here, and you catch a good limit in 30 minutes. But you spend 7 hours and 30 minutes going back in the back of a bunch of pockets that kind of suck. So it's a similar process to the Liv Scope or to the graphing or to anything. You just have to find those outlier scenarios is kind of what the key is whenever we're out here on the lake. Let's see here. Everyone talks about Sam Rayburn and Toledo Bend. Your videos talk about tougher lakes like Beaver and Dardanelle. Thank you for that. For sure. I mean, a lot of guys fish in Texas and a lot of guys fish in Gunnersville for YouTube. Gunnersville is absolutely loaded with fish. Any tournament that goes out of there, if you have a 20-pound bag of fish, you may not make a top 10 in even like the small jackpot tournaments. So like, it's hard to say, or like a Chickamauga or a place like that where it's loaded with fish. It's not as relatable to me watching people fish there, or a Toledo Bend or a Sam Rayburn. Sam Rayburn is pretty tough with the fishing pressure. I'm not saying it's easy, and it's tough fishing on all these lakes. It's not easy to catch fish anywhere. But like, I don't know, I love the challenge of the fact that I have to fish, a Grand Lake or a Beaver Lake or a Toledo Bend or not Toledo Bend, Lake Dardanelle. These lakes are not necessarily easy. I'm not saying that it isn't easy on Grand at times. There's times when the bags are really, really good on Grand. It's just, on average, it's really not that amazing or that like great compared to like a Gunnersville or compared to like a Toledo Bend. So, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of where I live too, so it's what I got. But I try to make the best of it, and I would say Grand is a really good lake. I'm not saying anything bad about Grand. It's a great lake, so I'm very fortunate to have a lake like this because there's a lot worse lakes out there, put it that way. Let's see here. This is from AZ Go Cats. Variety is cool, Demiki included. I think the difference in your videos and forward-facing sonar fixation is that MLF event was hours of the same thing, for sure. I also think your decision on content is do show a variety of techniques to educate, or only the techniques that give maximum catch, which may be the Demiki. So basically, yeah, focus on fishing the moments, and that's kind of what I know. That needs to be what I need to be doing. I agree with you guys on that. Like, what is the best technique that day, and explain it. Joseph says, I'm really glad you brought back this format. I was seriously missing it. Your newer format is great as well, but the live feeds feel is for the hardcore bass guys. Appreciate that. And then DD Max, love your videos. You recommend having 2 side imaging transducers? Asking because I don't have a jack plate. I feel like the motor interferes with my port scanning. Thanks. So I mount my transducer on the back. I just have one. Well, actually, I have like 3 because I run 3 different units at different times. But I only run 1 unit at a time. So I have a mount for 1 unit, and I just take it off and put a new one on. But depending on the way I mount the transducers, the engine will actually interfere with it. So I have to just raise and trim up the engine to like halfway, and then that will get rid of the interference. So when I set up when Darren, the integrated boat work, sets up my boat, he just makes sure that it's set at a level where when I trim up halfway, it doesn't block the side scan transducer. Let's see here. Let's see. Shane says, I'm sure you've done it before, but can you do another video on topo maps, i.e. humps, ditches, flats? Yeah, I can do another one. I got one over here. Let me try to find it. I got a lot of videos, so apologies on that. Yeah, there's a lot of videos out there. This is a really good one, though. Every structure explained. Every bass fisherman needs to know this inside and out. If you go to my YouTube page, it's from 2 years ago, but it's every single structure type explained. I have detailed graphics. I highlight everything. I give examples on Google Earth and on the contour maps. So this is the thumbnail, every structure explained. If you want to go onto my YouTube channel and find that is the video. That's the best video I can make on it. So I was thinking about maybe redoing these because these always seem to do well when I make them. But this is my like magnum opus, my best video I can possibly make with with the contour maps. Let's see here. Love your videos where you break down your graphing and why you choose various lures and techniques. Then you show us the results, whether it's spinning, casting, it's all good. Awesome. Yeah, UBTV, Candlewood in Connecticut, you need to catch 20 to 30 pounds. For sure. There's a lot of lakes out there where it's like just giant fish. And, it's awesome. I think that's great. It just depends on where you're at. I just feel like the majority of lakes are not like that. The guys fish. So, Grand Lake, there's still potential for you're going to be doing fantastic. Now, some guys might be like, okay, 15. Oh, the stream is down. Oh, okay. It came back up. I don't know what happened. Anyways, so I do my Catch 15 series where I catch 5 bass for 15 pounds. And in my region of the country, 5 bass for 15 pounds is fantastic. It's going to get you where you want to be most of the time. Some days you can do better or worse, but that's always like my goal weight when I do those challenges, because for my lakes, that's a very good bag. I mean, on Beaver Lake, sometimes there's not even a 15-pound bag caught in a 100-boat singles tournament. So if I'm catching 15 pounds, I'm like really on them. Now, if you did a 15-pound challenge on Gunnersville, you would be like last place in a 100-boat tournament. So it all depends on where you're at. If you're up north, obviously, like St. Lawrence River, 25 pounds of smallmouth will get you like 30th place. So it all depends. It's all relative. But the reason I do Catch 15 challenge versus like 25 or 30, I don't care about the number of like this shock factor of, I'm going to go catch a 50-pound bag of fish. I'm going to catch a respectable bag of fish on my waters that I have, and I'm going to set a realistic goal for myself. And I could go to lakes and it's like 30-pound, 40-pound challenge, and there's lakes in Oklahoma I could go do that on. I don't know. It's lakes that don't have contour maps. It's lakes that if I show, people are going to get mad at me. I just don't want to do that. So I focus on lakes that are just normal, I guess. And that's just, but people can do it any way they want. I'm not dissing on anybody about that either. Like, that's what people want to do. I mean, go for it. I just like doing it that way. It's just that's what's interesting and exciting for me. And some people like catching big fish, and that's what they want to do. That's 100% cool. I mean, not throwing shade at anybody, just so you know. Let's see here. Bassmaster Brewski, how come the Deep Dive app never recommends hover strolling Demiki? Because it's based off of tournament data, and the Demiki baits and the hover strolling have not been around that much, so the old data is outweighing the new data that we're getting in. There still haven't even been that many tournaments that have the Demiki rig being a top bait. So as we add in these new tournaments getting into the year, the Demiki rig will show up more and more and more as an effective technique and the top technique. It's weighted 2 different ways, so like this newer tournament is going to really help weight this technique there. So the reason it's not in there right now is just because it's taking a database of over 10,000 tournament patterns, and it's giving you what's best based on that data, based on the conditions, all these things historically. So it's going to be a little bit slow to react to trends just because we're trying to take the holistic, like, bigger approach rather than like, hey, one tournament got won with this deal, so we're going to say just go throw the Demiki rig, because it may not be the case all the time. And then Edward says lakes like that aren't realistic for most of us. Yeah, they're not realistic for me either. I'd have to drive like 3 hours, 4 hours to get to those lakes. I don't want to have to drive that far. I don't want to have to do those things too. It's like I just fish what's around me, which is what most people do. Joseph, when I see bait fish in the water column section on side scan and I mark it, is the GPS lining me up when I mark them in the water column, or should I be marking the shadow of the fish on the floor? So if you want to know exactly where those fish are, you should be marking the shadow of the fish on the floor or the shadow of the bait. That's a great question. So mark the shadow, because that's actually where it's going to be on the bottom. If you mark the actual bait ball on side scan, it'll be close enough. It'll be good-ish. But yeah, mark the shadow if you want the most accurate thing. Let's see here. Brian, you said, whoops, I don't know what happened. What happened, Brian? It was just probably the stream. Good to see you on here too, Brian. Let's see here. Also fish Pennsylvania and North New Jersey, and 15 pounds will win, but Candlewood, it's its own beast of a lake. Yeah, Candlewood, I heard, is crazy. I saw that you brought up on the tournament talking about Deep Dive app. Thought that was really cool. Congratulations. Appreciate that. Yeah, it was really cool to get on Major League Fishing, and it was cool to be able to show off what the app can do. We're working on a lot of cool stuff. The breakdown I did on Major League Fishing was really cool because it brought a lot of elements of the app together at once, and we're working really hard to actually take that story and duplicate it and actually like build that into the app where we give those insights. We just finished up our wind effects tool. We have the water clarity maps, we have the inflows, we have the section of lake maps, all the tournament data. This spring, basically, our next process, or part of that process, is integrating all of those tools together and trying to like say, this zone is going to be interesting because the wind's been blowing there for 18 hours straight, or it just rained in this section of the lake yesterday. There's a lot of water inflow points. There was clear water. Now, because of that rain, this water should be staining up, and like we can give a little insight on that. And so that's what we're working on right now, is to give those like cool insights. We just have to sync all the layers together and like figure all the scenarios. As you can imagine, it's very complicated, and then do the UI and the UX and all the app stuff. So we're like we're probably like 3, 4, 5 months away, who knows, from getting something that's like all that together. But we're constantly working on the app, so any support on the Deep Dive app is super appreciated for sure, as we just continue to build it. And even if you guys just subscribe just to support, we really appreciate that too, because we are working on it. We're putting out new features every single month, and we're just really working hard to make this Deep Dive app as best it possibly can be. So appreciate that. Let's see here. Cody says, miss Randy on the stream. Randy's super busy just doing Randy things. So we're don't know exactly what we're doing with the stream. I don't know about guests or like how we're going to be doing it. I just brought this back for the second time, so I don't know what the plans are for the stream. I want to know, like, in the comments, did you guys like this format where I kind of did like a podcasty style, talk through the history of ledge fishing? Did you like the breakdowns? Do you want a mix of both? Should we have guests on? I'm going to do a little bit of everything for at least the next probably 2 months, and just kind of try a bunch of stuff. Maybe try to get a recent tournament winner on the stream. Who knows? This right now, I'm just trying to keep it easy and just be here by myself talking, because it's the least complex schedule and figuring all that stuff out. Edward says, love the wind effects map. It works. Awesome. Glad to see that. Seems like you could do a quantum leap adding an AI engine to the Deep Dive app. Thoughts? We actually have some AI running in the app, and it's not like an engine like the Chat GPT thing, but we've actually talked about that, of kind of how to potentially do that, like ask a pro or ask the app. We need to get all of the pieces synced together first before we can get something like that, because we don't have all of the pieces talking to each other. But once we get all the pieces talking to each other, that's kind of the direction where it's like, show me all the wind blow in place. Da-da-da. I don't know if we're going to get there like anytime soon, but we're hoping to work on this app for a long time and really make it a cool tool. So again, any support you guys can have, Deep Dive app over on Apple App Store, Google Play Store. Really appreciate it. Let's see here. Deep Dive app is amazing. Would have loved that in the 1980s when I started bass fishing. Oh, I would have loved it too. When I started, the app it would have been amazing to have it back then. Let's see here. Bottom hardness is what I'm most interested in having incorporated. Yeah, we're working on some stuff to try to get some contours, like bathymetry or like contour line data. Try to get a deal together on that. It's kind of hard to get that together. I did show off in like an area analyzer on Bass Talk Live that we have running on some of the free public contour data, which is super cool. We have some really cool stuff. It's just everything moves super slow with the app world, and we've been working on it for now like 5 years, and it never ceases to amaze me how long everything takes. Everything takes forever. We have these ideas and we're like, let's do it, and it's like 2 years later, okay, we did it. And it's like just everything moves pretty slow, unfortunately. And then Edward says, I really enjoy all the formats you provide. Appreciate that. Shane says, definitely a mix. Breakdowns are great. And then Go Cat says, love this format of live where you break things down. Awesome. And Shane says, how about Greer's Ferry? I haven't been to Greer's in a while. I almost want to take a trip over there. I heard it's like you can get a lot of fish out there now. I haven't been to Greer's in years, but that was one of my favorite lakes back in the day. I had a pretty good tournament record out there back when I did junior club tournaments. I think I won like almost every tournament I ever fished on Greer's in my junior club. I love that lake, but I haven't been out there in years. Bassmaster Brewski says, love the Deep Dive app. I feel it would be hard to compete against the Lake Master app. Deep Dive plus One Boat Network app is all you need. Yeah, the Lake Master stuff and like the contour maps, that's tough. Like I wish I had that pulled up. I don't know if I do, where I have the area analyzer thing. I can maybe I can show you. I don't know if I downloaded anywhere on my computer here. It's probably on my other computer, guys, so apologies on that. I have that thing. I'm gonna maybe pull it up for the next one. It's a really cool tool we put together. But I don't know. Oh, here it is. Ha! We actually do have it. Look at that, guys. You are in business today. Okay, let me pull this up. So this is actually something we have running in a build in our app. And we are waiting, hopefully, to get this type of data. We have this for Grand Lake actually running. We only have it for Grand Lake and Table Rock and Beaver. So the problem is that we can only roll this out to 3 lakes, and it's just not worth it on our side to put all the dev effort to make this for only 3 lakes. Basically what this does is you can go in here, you highlight an area, and it'll give you the depth, the slope, the distance to shore, major and minor section of lake. We also can integrate water clarity, proximity to the inflow points, the wind effects stuff. This is just a build that just takes this into account because this is just kind of a test thing. But basically what you do is you highlight around, and it shows you all of the areas that are similar to that area, and it highlights it on the map. So 8 foot of water with this slope, that distance to shore, and then it's in the first half of the creek in the mid-lake section. So if we play through here, basically all of the areas around your lake are now highlighted like that. And it's a pretty cool tool, and it's even more powerful when you add in like, okay, is there clear water or stained water or dirty water? Is the wind hitting this? Like, is this a wind-blown area or not? Just a bunch of factors like that, basically. Is it close to a water inflow point? All these things that could be effective. Here's a shallow water example that's cool. So, like, this is a 45-degree bank, which are really popular on Grand, obviously, certain times of the year. You can see it highlights all the 45-degree banks. If it's not a 45-degree bank, it won't highlight it. And you can go through and you can really quickly pick out which banks are the 45 and which ones are not. So this is something that we have working on. Like, this is actually me like scrolling around in our app doing this. So pretty cool stuff. We just need to get the access to the data, and then we can roll it out. So there's a lot of cool things that we would love to do in the Deep Dive app. It's just a matter of all of the cards falling in place to make something like this happen. It's a huge monumental effort. Anyways, so that's kind of it, guys. That's all I had. Let's see here. Yeek says, yeah, this insight will be a game changer for sure. That's exactly what Dustin mentioned about the area where he closed out in the water clearing up in a particular area. Good stuff, bro. Thanks. Good deal. Awesome. Well, guys, hopefully you enjoyed the stream. It shows my stream bitrate is low. Are you guys having issues like the stream lagging or anything? It's kind of weird because I am hooked up directly to my internet stuff. I don't know what's going on here. This was never a problem in the past, so maybe I need to figure out my internet situation. Anyways, hopefully it's going okay. But yeah, appreciate everyone joining the stream. I know this was conflicting with another stream, so if you aren't able to watch this live, but you were able to catch it after the fact, really appreciate you tuning in if you're still here. And yeah, we'll be back next Thursday. Same deal. Thursday, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, trying to be consistent with these streams. And don't know what I'm going to talk about next week. You'll see it in the thumbnail I post maybe like Monday or Tuesday, what the topic's going to be. We're just going to keep switching it up and hopefully come with some good topics and maybe have a guest on. Who knows? We'll figure something out. Let's see here. Edward says, thanks for doing this, Johnny. 555 here. Awesome. Canyon Fishing, do you still offer paid lake breakdowns? We don't do the lake breakdowns anymore, guys, on the website. there was some just time and effort and things like that. It was making it difficult, and also with some of the deep dive stuff. So not doing the lake breakdowns anymore, unfortunately. But if you guys do want lake breakdowns or know where to kind of look on your lake, Deep Dive app can definitely get you started in the right direction. Whirlybirds, don't forget to upload this to the podcast. That is a great idea. I need to get on that, because I know the podcast, people like the podcast. I forgot about the podcast. We'll try to figure that out. Timo, how's it going, man? Thanks, Johnny. Don't be a stranger. Thanks for joining in as usual, Timo. And Brian, appreciate it. Thanks to see you. Good to see you here as well. So have a great night, guys. See you next Thursday. And enjoy the Super Bowl this weekend if you're going to watch that. Also, again, check out the stream over at Bass Talk Live for the... it's a stream to support Miles Berghoff and his family. So definitely check that out. If it's still going on right now, definitely go drop some support over there. Really appreciate that. Bass Talk Live. So anyways, appreciate it, guys.